This recording may contain content unsuitable for children. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Dungeoncast. I'm your host Brian.
And I'm your host Will.
This is the podcast where we discuss everything Dungeons & Dragons, from savvy swordsmen to sassy savants. And today's topic is character creation.
Prepare yourselves. I cast Fireball. The Dungeoncast.
Okay, Will, so I think I'm ready to play Dungeons & Dragons.
Are you now?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't think you are.
Well,
I think you're missing something, Brian.
What is that?
I think you're missing the most important part of being a player. Creating your character.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I need a character to play Dungeons & Dragons because
Yeah.
I'm role-playing.
Indeed you are.
Okay, so how do I start with creating a character?
Okay, so creating character is, for me, the most fun part of playing the game. I love creating characters. I've created more characters than I've ever gotten the chance to play. And all characters, in my opinion, start with your character concept. Like, it's up to you to kind of imagine what you want to play in this fantasy world. So usually I'll have some spark of inspiration from like a character from a video game or from a movie or from a book, or maybe like take an event in my life and kind of like spin a character based off that scenario or whatnot. You know, is your character concept a swordsman who's been down on his luck for years, and you know he's just trying to find, you know, some sort of purpose in life? You know, is he a wizard looking for some sort of object of power? Like, what do you want to play? And then from there you can kind of build your character, mechanically speaking.
So the format of Dungeons & Dragons is usually to set out on an adventure. So is it important to keep in mind that your character needs to be open to be an adventurer?
I think so, definitely. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, absolutely. Because if your character's not willing to go anywhere, well, then you're getting left behind, or you're just gonna make your DM's life very difficult.
Yeah, it's like he's got to figure out how to get you out of town, or she.
Like, no, this is my farm. Why would I leave? It's like, why did you create this character?
Yeah, why did you create a farmer who has to tend to it? He loves his crops more than he loves like caverns, I guess.
I can never leave my sheep.
Okay, so also I was wondering, when I'm creating a character, do I need to keep in mind like some kind of medieval setting? Because usually Dungeons & Dragons kind of revolves around like a Dark Ages theme.
For your basic vanilla D&D, yeah, it's going to be a medieval setting, but your setting is really going to be dependent on your DM. Your dungeon master is going to be running this game, and it's his world. He's created it, so he can tell you kind of all about it and answer all your questions.
So obviously you can just create characters at will and without any kind of game in mind. But
True.
If you do have plans to play a game and you know who your dungeon master and your fellow players are going to be, do you recommend asking like your dungeon master what the setting is and like and keep that in mind while you build a character?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. Communication between the DM and the player character or players is of the utmost importance. Plus, like, you're just making your DM's life easier. Like, I hate nothing more than if I'm running a very specific like campaign setting and like, I don't know, let's say a steampunk setting, and somebody comes up with a character that's more, say, like a cyberpunk type character from like the future. I'm just like, no, that's not going to fit in the setting. I told all of you guys what the setting was. Like, it just makes everyone's life difficult.
Okay, so there are some guidelines then when you're building a character as far as playing in a set game.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's going to be up to your DM, but most games are going to fall within, this is high fantasy or middle fantasy, medieval, Lord of the Rings-ish, that type of stuff. There's going to be knights, swords, wizards, Dungeons and Dragons.
For our listeners, if you guys have never read a fantasy novel or watched a fantasy movie or really experienced anything in a fantasy setting, we really recommend that you go watch something. Lord of the Rings is a great introductory kind of break into the fantasy realm.
Yeah, I could talk for days about fantasy movies and fantasy books and literature. Just forever. I'm a huge fan of all that stuff. When you actually built your first character and you started playing this game, you weren't that familiar with the whole fantasy thing, were you?
Yeah, I'd seen Lord of the Rings, and
Mhm.
I tried to read The Hobbit, and obviously I grew up playing video games, and that's typically set into fantasy, Legend of Zelda, things like that. And I think you said in the last episode that we like Dungeons and Dragons is the basis of a lot of people draw from Dungeons and Dragons to make their content.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, so that really helped me a lot breaking in. But I other than that, I'm relatively inexperienced in the fantasy genre. So actually playing Dungeons and Dragons is teaching me a lot about what the origins of a lot of things that I've heard of, and like really clearing up some things. Like as far as like races and classes go and things like that.
Right. You can kind of see like, oh, that's where they got that idea.
Right, exactly. Like, oh, is that where this is from?
Right. Yeah, that happens a lot in this game. So speaking of character concepts, the concept of a character at the creation point, you just recently, like 6 months ago or so, created your first character, Rohan.
Yeah.
So what was your thought process there when you were creating that concept for what Rohan is?
Well, the first thing I did do was ask, what are my boundaries here? Like when I'm creating a character, what tools do I have to work with? And I think you pointed me over to the player's handbook, and kind of flipped through races and classes, and you were explaining to me like what my options were, and I just kind of picked the thing that stuck out to me most. And I'm a big fan of Avatar: The Last Airbender and sequel series Legend of Korra, and the Four Elements has always been something that I've been infatuated with in lore and fantasy. And when you talked about the Genasi and how they're elemental based, that really was like, oh, okay. So that immediately sticks out to me, and I'm gonna pick one of those. And I went with air. So air Genasi was my pick, and then as far as like making a class for it, I wasn't really sure what to do. And I think we flipped through the player's handbook. I was like, oh, well, I'll just go with something basic. And I think you said, well, fighter's pretty basic. You can't get much more basic than that, I don't think.
Yeah.
And so that's what I ended up going with.
Okay. Well, you know what? That actually kind of informs me of where we should kind of take this conversation, because like for some people, myself and others that I've met, like the character concept phase of the character creation is the most fun and easy part, because I'm an imaginative type of sort, and I just got ideas for days. But for a new player, that might be a little difficult, especially someone being unfamiliar. So like the first place you want to start is kind of looking at your list of races and classes.
Yeah, I just kind of threw a dart. So yeah, the more informed you are, I feel like the better odds you have of getting a character that you can really get into and really love. Because I feel like the richness of role playing as a character is really like committing, being into it, and discovering not just what you've built and like what you can do with your character, but like who your character is also very important. Because in Dungeons and Dragons, you're going to be having to make decisions, and they might be difficult. So you're going to learn what your character is, or who your character is, and what they do in specific situations. Because it's not you, the player, making the decision; it's you playing as the character making the decision, which is very important, I feel like, to get the experience of the game.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think we should start this off. Like, let's talk about the list of available races in this game. In D&D, when we're talking about a race, we're basically talking about like your species. And in D&D, there are a lot of sentient like peoples, if you will,
Like humanoids,
like mostly humanoids, pretty much almost exclusively humanoids. And they range from, of course, humans. There are elves, there are dwarves, and halflings, which people are pretty familiar with all those concepts generally. Then there are also some more exotic races. There are dragonborn, which are basically dragon men, and they have like different features and stuff.
so basically a guy that like looks like a dragon.
Yeah, basically, yeah, like a humanoid with like dragon scales for skin and like a dragon head and whatnot, and spines and all that stuff. And then there's tieflings, which are usually originally humans or perhaps elves, or just some sort of humanoid that ended up with some sort of fiendish blood in their bloodline, whether that be from a demon or a devil that's kind of corrupted their bloodline so that their progeny then portray fiendish attributes such as horns or tails or red skin or fangs or kind of claws. Let's see. There are also gnomes, which are kind of like I like to think of them as like short elves. They tend to have some magical features to them. They're
Is that kind of like a halfling? Like, because a halfling is what exactly?
A halfling is basically like a small human. They're more nimble and they tend to be clever and brave and whatnot.
So for anyone who's seen Lord of the Rings, it's more like one of the hobbits, right?
Yeah, more like the hobbits are basically where that concept comes from for halflings. There are gnomes. And I think that pretty much covers the basic races for the player's handbook. There are more races that can be found in other books. There are Goliaths, which are basically giant, like stone-like men. There are the Genasi, which are like an elemental humanoid, like what Rohan is. He's an air Genasi. There's also fire, water, and earth.
There's Storm too, right? I saw something like that.
In previous editions, there have been Storm. In the current edition, they have not come out with a Storm Genasi, although they are my favorite. And there's just so many other races. There's the Asamar, which are like angelic people. There are Kokra, which are basically birdmen. There are the Shadar Kai. There are the Warforged, and the list goes on and on and on. But for the most part, beginners are going to be limited to the 8 races or so that are in the player's handbook.
Yeah, that's a good kicking off point, right?
Yeah, and I would definitely suggest starting there, kind of looking at what's available to you and see if any of the races kind of, that elf looks really cool, like with that bow and his, leather armor, like looks like something I want to do. And then you can kind of delve further and see what you want to build on that.
Okay, so you pick your race, and whatever decision, however you come to that decision is up to you.
Mm-hmm.
But whether it be based on looks or what have you, but then what do you do? So you have a race. You pick your class next, right?
Yeah, you would pick your class next. But before we move on to classes, let's talk just a little bit about the mechanics behind your race.
Okay.
So when you pick your race, you're going to gain some mechanical benefits. Usually, you're going to get some sort of pluses to your ability, to 1 or 2 ability scores, whether it be strength or dexterity, intelligence, charisma, etc.
Those are the main abilities, right?
Yeah, you have 6 main abilities in the game that kind of define your character, which we'll get into that a little bit later, probably after we're done talking about classes. But your race will affect and influence that. You're also going to gain certain features, like some races gain like free spell slots or like a free known magical spell. Some have the ability to wield weapons regardless of their class. Some get like certain like special senses, like dark vision, and the list goes on and on. So each race has not only its own look and feel, but there are mechanical attributes to it that help influence what your character can and can't do later on.
Okay, so we've talked about your race. We've talked about the mechanical benefit that you get from that. What do you? So now we got to pick a class, right?
Yeah, class is going to define your character more than race, I would say, for the most part.
Okay.
Class is what you do, like. Are you a fighter? Are you a spellcaster? What defines you, and where do you kind of source your abilities from? There are a lot of different types of classes. There are classes that mainly do like martial type fighting. So there's the fighter, the barbarian who uses like anger and rage to fuel his prowess, if you will. There's the rogue, who's more of a dexterous sneak or thief kind of fighter. There's the ranger, who is more of a survivalist and more at home in the wild and capable of traversing that better than most characters. And then there's spellcasters. You have your wizards, which are really intellectual, and you have your sorcerers, which kind of have a hidden inner power that they're learning to control. Warlocks, for instance, make deals with beings that are more powerful than themselves. Druids derive their power from magic from nature. There are religious characters such as clerics or paladins. And 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 then there's the bard as well, which is also a magical character and derives his or her magic from music, if you will.
out of it, like an instrument typically. and,
Out of an instrument or even their voice. Yeah.
magic fueled sine waves.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a whole bunch of classes in the player's handbook, and they're all really cool and really in depth, and they each have their own even subclasses, if you will, within their class called archetypes. And looking at all those and pairing it with your race, you're going to get a really good idea for what your character can and can't do.
Let's I don't know, what do you go for first? If you didn't have any characters, which one would you want to play first?
What do you mean, like
Like if you were going to build a character today and you didn't have any other characters for an upcoming game,
Right.
which kind of race and class combo would you pick?
For me, I'm always a sucker for elves. I always like playing an elf. I just like the mixture of kind of mystery, wisdom, and the nimbleness and dexterity that an elf kind of brings to the table.
Okay, so you pick an elf, and what kind of mechanical benefit do you get from being an elf?
So if I chose elf, within the race of elves, there are what are called sub races, which kind of like differentiate themselves from each other. So
Like
with
a type of elf, or
like
like
type of elf,
maybe because of a regional difference or something like that.
Yeah, regional or cultural difference. There are high elves, which are elves that tend to be more intelligent and have more magical capabilities, and tend to be a little bit more pompous and arrogant. They tend to like they have their own like elven cities and whatnot that are like super elegant and ancient and whatnot. Then there's wood elves, which kind of parted from that mindset and kind of went to live in the wild and become one with nature, which those tend to be the kind that I typically like to play. But then there are also dark elves, also known as drow, which live in the Underdark. And they have like a dark black or purple skin with white hair, and they have a totally different disposition than other elves and totally different abilities and features. They're so different from regular elves, they're almost like their own race.
Okay. So so let's say you pick you said
Wood elf. We'll go with wood elf.
okay, so what would a wood elf get, like,
So
as far as
wood elves get what, +2 to dexterity, +1 to wisdom. They get an automatic proficiency in the perception skill. They get some like stealth benefits while in like certain terrain or weather or something like that. I don't have the book open in front of me, so I can't exactly recall, but they get things like that.
Okay, and then so you've picked your race.
Mhm.
So what class would you go with after that?
I'm always trying to find a class that like can do a little bit of everything. I like to be able to do some magic, but also when it comes to hand-to-hand combat, not be totally at a loss. So for my wood elf, I would probably go with a fighter who kind of specialized with like dexterity fighting, and maybe end up going like the Eldritch Knight path, which is an archetype within the fighter, which can do some magic and kind of work that into their fighting capabilities.
Okay, so you're gonna be a wood elf fighter with what was that archetype?
The Eldritch Knight.
The Eldritch Knight archetype.
Yeah.
So that's an archetype is kind of like a class within a class, right?
Yeah,
like a specialization.
It's a specialization. You usually don't even deal with that till you get to level 3. So at original character creation, this character would just be a wood elf fighter. Simple as that. So it doesn't have to start off so complicated. I know that can sound pretty complicated, but I always, and whenever I'm creating a character, kind of already have that idea of where this character's going in my head,
Okay, so mechanically, really quick, let's talk about a few things.
Mhm.
You said you get a +2 to dexterity.
Yeah.
And +1 to wisdom.
Yeah.
And so when we say +2 and +1 to these skills, what does that mean exactly?
Okay, so you're gonna pick your race, you're gonna pick your class, and later on we'll get into backgrounds, because backgrounds are technically optional. So after you've chosen that, you have to worry about your ability scores. That's the big thing right there. And the ability scores follow as such: strength, which is pretty straightforward. It's how strong you are. Like how much you can lift, how hard you can hit things.
Yeah, how hard you can punch something.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever
exactly.
it is you do.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's dexterity, which is kind of like how nimble and quick are you? Like, what's your reaction time like? How good are you at aiming? Like your bow and arrow, or getting that finesse weapon right in the right spot, or performing like acrobatics tricks or sleight of hand. Constitution, which is your ability to endure. It's your stamina, like how long can you keep up,
How many hits you can take. Your constitution's pretty important because it is also the basis for your hit points, right?
Yeah, so it's the basis of your hit points. It's also going to tell you how well you can endure harsh weather, such as blizzards and intense heat and whatnot. How long you can survive out there. After that, we kind of get into the mental ability scores, if you will, starting with intelligence, which is straightforward like strength. It's how smart are you? How much do you know about history, about magic, about lore and nature, and all that stuff? How brainy are you? Usually the wizard is going to be the one with high intelligence. Then there's wisdom, which gets confused with intelligence a lot, but is not the same thing. Wisdom is a little bit harder to describe. It's more like your natural intuition and common sense, your ability to perceive things, your ability to see through trickery.
Yeah, and like what you can expect from the world around you, and how your character can react to it, how like, efficiently they can do that, right?
Yeah, definitely. And then there's charisma, which is kind of like your social skills, like how likable are you, how strong is your personality, your ability to enforce your will upon others, whether that be through intimidation or persuasion. How are you a smooth talker, and such? Are you a good flirt? Hey everyone, we wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for listening and watching. We really appreciate your support. If you like what we do here at the Dungeoncast, please spread the word and tell your friends about us. You can find us on soundcloud.com/thedungeoncast, on iTunes, or click the link in the description to hear us on YouTube. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you have a question, suggestion, or just want to say hi, feel free to leave a comment. You can also reach out to us on Twitter at thedungeoncast, or send us an email at thedungeoncast@gmail.com. That's it for the break. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Let's talk about, I feel like strength and dexterity and constitution, those are all pretty straightforward things. Intelligence is kind of falls in line with that, the things like how well you can problem solve and things like that.
Yeah.
But with wisdom it's a little different.
It's a little muddy.
Let's put me in a scenario where my wisdom might come into play, like what would I have to, because we would have to roll for wisdom, right?
Yeah. So wisdom is going to come into play in a couple ways. The most obvious way is when someone casts a spell, depending on the type of spell, you're going to have to roll a save roll, which will be
to save yourself from whatever is going to happen to you, right?
Exactly. To save yourself from utter destruction. And depending on what the spell is, it's going to define which ability score you need to roll. Wisdom is usually rolled in order to save yourself from an illusion, if you will. Basically, a spell form of a strong lie. And the wiser you are, the more capable you are of seeing through that lie. And that's also portrayed kind of on the skill list with the skill insight. So if you're talking to an NPC and he's full of shit, and at a character, that this dude's full of shit. But in character, you may or may not know. You can choose to roll insight to see if your character can detect the bullshit. And a high roll obviously will, and then you can call him out on his shit.
Okay, so is now a good time to talk about staying in character?
Yeah, okay, staying in character is going to come up like a billion times in this podcast, so get used to it. But yeah, that would be a great time to talk about it. So out of character, that this NPC is full of shit, but you roll that insight check and you flub it. It's a critical miss or just a fail, whatever. And the DM has decided, like, no, you don't think he's lying, or you don't know that he's lying. You have to roleplay that. Just because you know that he's lying doesn't mean your character does.
Right.
Yeah.
So that can be difficult, I feel, for a lot of players. I know we've had
is.
some instances in our game where we know, like, out of character, every player has a bird's eye view
Yeah.
on what's happening. Even if your character wasn't present for a conversation, you, the player, were definitely present for everything that happened. So you have, as a player, have all this information, and you have to kind of wall it off in your brain when you're role playing, because you know your character wasn't present for a conversation between two players that might have been somewhere else, or maybe a conversation with an NPC.
Right.
We had a situation where I rolled to insight to detect a lie, and I critted it, and I was like, oh yeah, like, this guy's a liar in character, in my character's brain. You know, he's not going to say that out loud. We're in front of somebody. And then another character who wasn't present, you know, walks into the bar we're in, and he's like, starts just like going up.
He
this
just started
guy's
tearing
butt.
into the dude.
Yeah,
I was like, Jesus, man, you haven't even been here for this. What are you doing?
He's like, oh, I know, like, what do you like?
You're
just
a liar.
So
It's like, what
suspicious
the
of this
fuck?
guy. Like, dude, there's no way that, like, your character would have done that. Like,
Right.
everybody knows your character, but since you know, I feel like that can be really difficult to kind of pull the reins back on yourself, because, you know, like, you want to progress the story, and you want to
Right.
win D&D, right?
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Yeah, it is tough for a lot of new players and old players, just because instinctually we always want to make the best and most right decision we possibly can. And for the most part, you guys do a great job of separating character and player knowledge. Like,
I
you
think
guys
that's
are
the only time that we've ever had like a flub
even
like
a
that.
slight issue. Yeah, and
we were-
considering the three of you were completely new players, like, I was really impressed with your guys' capability to do that.
Yeah, in that scenario, we were really anxious with this guy, like, lying to us.
You
and
guys were not happy with him.
No, it was bad. So I understand, like, wanting to do, like, my character wanted to, like, beat that guy up right there, and
guys
out
are
of character,
crazy.
I wanted to beat that guy up right there too. I was frustrated as a player and as in character. You know, it's like understandable you want to do that, but to keep the point of the game is to role play.
Yeah, definitely.
So I feel like you really want to try your best to stay true to your character and stay true to events happening in the world of the game you're playing, so you don't muck it up with your godly bird's eye view knowledge.
Yeah,
that you-
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, let's get back to the actual character creation process. So back to ability scores. You now know what they all stand for roughly. There's more to them than that, but that was a basic run through what they're supposed to stand for. Now, how do you determine them would be the next question. And there's multiple ways to do that. 3 ways, in fact, that the player's handbook gives you. The first and foremost way I think that is suggested is what is called a standard array. They just give you 6 numbers, and you plug them into the ability scores of your choice, and then add all your stuff to it, and that's what you got. And it's a really balanced way to do it. I like it. It's a little bit boring to do it that way, but it is also a nice way to guarantee balance between the party. So, like, one character isn't ridiculously stronger than another.
Right. There's going to be, whenever you build a character, your character is going to have strengths and your character is going to have weaknesses.
Yeah.
And the standard array is built around that concept.
Yeah. The next way that's presented is what is called a point buy system, where basically they give you a set number of points at which you can buy ability scores, and there's like a little key telling you how
like
much
you can
what costs.
allocate them to whichever score you want.
Exactly. So it gives you like 29 points, but they don't transfer directly. So it's not like I'll take 15 of those and they make one of my ability scores. It costs you 3 to have a score of 12 or something like that. It sounds a little complicated, but the chart for it is right there in the book.
That's in the player's handbook.
Yeah, it's in the player's handbook. Normally, in previous editions, the point buy system is my go-to because it's a way to keep it balanced between characters because they all have the same amount of points that they can use, but you can also kind of tweak and customize it to exactly how you want it.
So if your character wants a really big score, they're going to have to lack in something else.
Exactly, they're going to pay for it. But in this edition, I actually do not really I'm not a big fan of the point allocation, just because I looked over it, and you cannot even buy yourself the score that is the standard array. So
so you're better off just taking the standard array.
Yeah, you're better off taking the standard array. I mean, I don't know why anyone would choose the point buy in 5th edition. It's just lacking. Like you pointedly cannot get as good as the standard array, so why would you do that? And then of course there is my favorite way, and I think the way I would say most people do it, and that's rolling for your stats. And the way the player's handbook tells you to do it is pretty much how I have you guys do it. I do add a couple house rules to that, but you take 4 d6s, which are your standard like dice, gambling dice, if you will, 6-sided.
Your Yahtzee die.
Your Yahtzee die.
Monopoly
There we go. And you're gonna roll all 4 of them, and you're gonna add the 3 highest numbers together.
Yahtzee.
And drop the 4th one, and that's gonna be one of your scores. And then you're gonna do that 5 more times until you have your 6 numbers, and then you're gonna allocate them. And what's cool about that system is you get the chance for some really good high numbers, but you also have the risk of some really low ones. And overall, you're gonna end up pretty average. I've heard people have problems with this system because they say, "Oh well, I mean, it could be really out of balance. Like your fighter could just have like 18s across the board and just be a monster. Meanwhile, like your ranger or whatever just rolled really badly and he just sucks at everything." I've never actually experienced that happen in real life. I'm sure it happens. I'm sure it happens a lot.
Yeah,
but
it has to. I mean, you get stuff all over
statistically, it has to have happened many times. But in all the games I've ever ran, I've never really had that issue. And I also, in the case of that actually happening, I have a couple house rules that I like to add in. So I allow the 6 ability score rolls, and then I let you re-roll one of those scores one time. So if you get one really bad one, yeah, you can re-roll it one time, and then that's it. And then at the very end of it all, if you're not happy with what you got, I'll let you just go back to the standard array.
Yeah, if you rolled really under average,
right?
Yeah, that's
yeah.
cool.
Which I think only one time has anyone ever really taken the standard array. So, and that would be Jake. Poor Jake.
Oh well.
Yeah, and and then that character died. Oh, poor guy.
I mean, that's the risk. I mean, that's part of the fun is I know that you want your character to be hardy and you want your character to be good at lots of things because you want to win the game. But I mean, you got to deal with what you get. Like my character Rohan, he's not the most charismatic and he's not the smartest. And I just kind of play that. Just kind of rolls into his character. He's a little bit above average intelligence, so he's got an 11, which is. You told me a 10 isn't the average human being's
your average score. Your average commoner is gonna basically have like 5 10s and 1 8 because everyone's bad at something.
Right, exactly. So yeah, my character rolled pretty well. We've got a couple 17s in there and nothing really below a 10, I don't think, is when I rolled it.
Yeah, I don't think you have anything sub 10. Speaking of like the actual numbers themselves, they range from anywhere as low as 8 to 20, usually. 20 being the max. You actually can't have an ability score higher than a 20 in this game. And the ability score number is important because it defines what is called your modifier, which is that number you get to add to all the rolls pertaining to that ability score. And the way it works, it's hard to describe. So the way it works is, let's say you have a 10, you have a +0, meaning you have neither a bonus nor a negative to that ability score.
So let's say it's strength. I have a 10 in strength.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably like a bard or something like that, right?
Yeah, or just something you're probably not utilizing that. Or if you are, I feel sorry for you.
So I'm going to have to climb a rope because I don't know, some bridge I'm on collapsed or whatever.
The troll is coming for you and there's nowhere to go but up.
Yeah. So that's going to be a strength check, which so I've got a 10. So help me, D20, please.
Yeah, you're going to roll a D20 and add a beautiful 0 to it.
Okay.
And then that's what you get. Meanwhile, a character with 18 strength, which is really high, is going to have a whopping +4 to his modifier. And he's going to have a much bigger bonus to getting away from that troll.
So I go to climb the rope and
Mhm.
I roll 8-10, but I add my +4 modifier, and now I've got a 14, which typically is a pretty good roll, right?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
getting up the rope, no problem.
Yeah, so that I got away from the troll. The bard might not.
Yeah, no, he's done. So and then of course if you drop below 10, it starts getting into the negative. So if you have an 8 in a score, not only do you not get a bonus, but in fact you're so bad at it you get a negative. So an 8 would be -1, and that's generally how it works. Every even number, the bonus, the modifier goes up or down. So 10 is 0, 12 is 1, 14 is 2, 16 is 3, all the way up to 20, which is 5. And yeah, so that's your basic on ability scores.
So we have a character in our game that has an 8 in, I think, stealth. So
Oh yeah, the paladin.
he's got a -1 to stealth,
Yeah.
and we can't take him anywhere if we're trying to be
Yeah,
trying to be cool.
It's pretty hilarious that his stealth is so bad considering his backstory actually is super surrounding his ability to catch criminals at night. But that is
He's pulling it off anyway.
Yeah, he does
it's
it anyways.
crazy.
And that's what's cool about 5th edition compared to previous editions. In previous editions, if you were bad at something, it was highly advised that you don't even fucking try. In this edition, they've kind of compressed the numbers down from the high end and up from the low end, if you will, so that even if you're not necessarily good at something, you still got a shot. And it never hurts to try. And, he tries, and more often than not, he makes it work.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. But that part of it is failing your rolls can change everything that's going on in the situation in that moment. If you fail it, you have to find another way to compensate.
Oh, yeah.
basically. Whether it be like you have to eat some damage, or you fall behind and like your party has to go back for you, or whatever.
For me, my favorite part about failing and or just having a really shitty score in something is oftentimes it forces you to get creative. And those creative moments usually are the most memorable.
Let's talk about building your character. Would you roll your stats before you start kind of fleshing your character out
can.
with backstory and things like that?
Yeah, you can. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't. I usually, for me, ability scores are usually almost the last thing I do. Outside of choosing like my skills and whatnot. And that's the thing. When you choose your class, when you choose your class, you will have like a list of skills, and it will tell you how many to choose from of those skills that you can be proficient in. And proficiency just means you get to add a certain bonus called your proficiency bonus, which just means you're trained in this. You're really good at that. And you also get skills from something called a background, which is actually something we should delve into. So when it comes to ability scores, roll them before, roll them after. It's up to you, whatever your preference is. There's no right or wrong there. But so after you've chosen your class and after you've chosen your race and possibly after you've rolled your ability scores, there is a third option, which I think most people do use in their games, called background. And I find backgrounds are very handy, especially for new characters or new players who are having a little bit of trouble coming up with a concept.
Yeah, they need some direction.
Yeah, they need some direction. And the background is really cool because it's a very general kind of backstory, if you will, that pertains to your character that you're going to gain a little bit of mechanical stuff from. And the list, there's like 12 or 13 of them in the player's handbook, but there are things like criminal or acolyte. There's outlander, sage, hermit, soldier.
Yeah, I think Rohan went with clan crafter. That one?
Yeah, that's actually one from a book outside the player's handbook.
Okay.
But yeah, clan crafter was that one, or basically he's an artisan, if you will. He's a blacksmith. And the choosing a background kind of gives you just a little bit more of stuff to work with for your character backstory, a little bit more flavor, if you will. And generally, a background is going to give you 2 extra skills, maybe a language or 2. Maybe some tool proficiencies, like for instance, Rohan can work with blacksmith tools because of his background. And usually there's some sort of it's not exactly a mechanical feature, but it can be. Each background comes with some sort of feature, specific to their background, which allows them to do a certain something. So I'll use Outlander as an example. Outlanders are like basically survivors out in the wild, and they get a feature which means that they never, they can always remember landmarks of anywhere they go. So it's really hard for them to lose their way, and they're really good at foraging for food in the wild. And like each background has like a little something.
So not only is that something to flesh out your character with, it's also mechanically benefits you. Like
Yeah,
out in the
absolutely.
wild, you literally like, hey, I want to find some food, and DM can go, oh, well, good thing you're good at that. Go get some.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the thing about a lot of the background features is they're a little bit more vague than some of the more mechanical features you get from your class or race. And a lot of them are, and they always have the little subtext saying up to your DM's discretion. So
Okay. So let's go back to your wood elf fighter.
okay,
Do we have a name?
we'll call him Gilthanis.
Gilthanis, the wood elf fighter. What kind of background would you put on him?
For Gilthanis, I would put, for funsies, I always like playing like nobility or royalty on the run, or like someone who's like they were born into aristocracy, but then they decided it wasn't for them and they shunned it and they're moving on. So I would give him a mysterious noble background, which noble is one of the backgrounds, and that would be kind of built into his backstory, but he doesn't like to talk about it. Like,
Okay.
yeah.
So just with that, you kind of get an idea of who this person in this world might be, and we haven't even talked about them being in a world. They're just this character right now outside of the world.
We just basically built this shell of a character, but just based off the decisions I made, you can tell a lot about him. He has this predisposed knowledge to magic. He's a fighter. He's a wood elf, and he's also a noble. And kind of tells you that in itself kind of tells you a little bit of a story.
Okay, so with being a noble, a lot of people carry around, like characters will carry around something with them to show that they are a noble, or something like that. And they can flash like some kind of badge or something like that, like their name, like, hey, I'm from this family, and
Right.
somebody may or may not recognize that and us respond accordingly.
Yeah, it's true. Generally, like he could carry some sort of insignia that signifies who he is and where he's from. And I think the noble background actually comes with that. Like you literally get that, which your class and your background both give you a certain amount of resources of your starting equipment, if you will. So for your class, like it'll tell you can start with this, and this, or you can start with this much gold. And then you can kind of flip over to the items part of the player's handbook and kind of go shopping, if you will, and buy and decide what your character starts with.
So on the character sheet, there are little boxes that say personality traits, where you kind of put a one-word descriptor in that box. Now those things, I'll use Rohan as an example. He likes freedom and fairness, and he is kind of greedy. So that's something I kind of implemented to give him like a potential flaw, like, and I thought that would be fun in the game since in Dungeons and Dragons you go into dungeons and you fight monsters and there's treasure and stuff, and there's obviously the chance of temptation being something that could like distract him from his goals, or kind of interrupt what the party is doing. Like, oh, I think I see a chest over there. Like, I'm gonna go get it. Bye. I'm going.
Yeah, and actually that flaw has come up many times in our campaign. Yeah,
I almost killed us.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. And other people's flaws have almost killed the party at other times as well.
Yeah.
It's important. It's important to have traits, have like certain personality quirks, if you will, and flaws. I think just as long as you come up with one major flaw for your character, you're gonna have a much more fun time, because it's gonna come up and it's gonna become an issue, and you're gonna have to get around it, and it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, working through. I know it sounds like you don't. I'm so conditioned playing video games. Like my character in a video game is usually perfect by the end of the game. That's the thing is like you don't get to the end of the game necessarily. You might
Right.
get to the end of your campaign,
Yeah.
but life goes on, and like you treat your character in the world like you would treat yourself in the world, like taking big risks that you don't think you could feasibly do. Like let's say your character is not the best jumper, like they don't have really good acrobatics, and there's a big pit blocking your way, and like
if only I were a better jumper.
yeah, there might be another way around it. You have to think creatively, but you don't want to just jump because who knows how far that pit goes down. You might die. Your character will die, and you do not get to play them anymore.
Yeah.
So that's something that you should be mindful of. I feel like is don't just try to do stuff and hope the D20 saves you. It might not. I don't know if there's a character that can't jump, no acrobatics or anything like that. Other characters are jumping over this pit. Like, how can we problem solve this guy?
Throw him a rope. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. Like the strong guy throws the guy who can't jump a rope and just pulls him on over.
And so that guy will kind of need to strength check, right, and help.
Yeah,
there's a series
it'll
of
be
checks you have to pass.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's no knot tying check. That's just something you do, right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna force that. That'd be silly. Yeah.
So,
like your knot sucks. Now you die.
okay, so let's say we throw this guy a rope. I mean, does every character have rope? Like, where are we getting this stuff? Like
how do you choose your starting equipment, basically?
yeah, like I get starting equipment when I come into the game, right? So
Yeah, you do.
I just pick from what are my options here? How does that work?
There's a couple ways to do it, and to answer your first question, yeah, generally most players are going to have rope. For some reason, it's almost in every kit. So when you choose your class, it's going to give you some starting equipment options, like choose from column A or choose from column B, and so on and so forth. And you can do that, and if you follow that, it's going to give you some real basic stuff. That's going to be pretty fitting probably to your character, and it's going to be great, actually. I actually suggest that way. It's not a bad way to start. The other way is the book also gives you an allotment of gold that you can decide to have, or that you kind of roll for it, and
Like starting money,
yeah. And then you can flip over to the part of the book where the items are and start buying stuff like your armor and your weapons of your choice. There are what are called, I think they're called packs or kits, and there's 6 different ones, and they each come with a different allotment of stuff, and they're all geared towards like the kind of character your character is. So there's the scholar pack, there's the dungeoneering pack, the explorers pack, there's the priest pack, and there's a couple others, and each of them is going to have like slightly different stuff from each other.
I like the idea of a priest pack.
Yeah.
Has a cross in it.
Yeah, sure. I guess there could be
Holy water in vials.
Yeah. Seriously.
Now, what's in a priest pack? I've never seen
I
that.
don't have the book open in front of me, but I've just drawing off memories. I've never actually played a character that actually chose to have that pack. It's like you'll have like candles and like an alms box and like maybe a talisman of your deity.
See, I feel like we haven't really touched on that. So if you pick a character and everything, one of the things you got to determine is, are they religious? Right?
Yeah.
So when you're a religious character, you usually align yourself with one of the gods in Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Right.
Which there are a set list of, I think.
Yes and no. In the back of the book, there are lists of deities. Some are lists of pantheons of gods, if you will. Some are D&D setting, like original, that most people, if you're not familiar with D&D, have never heard of. And then there's like literally there'll be like the Norse pantheon and the Greek pantheon and the Egyptian pantheon.
Right.
And that's up to your DM what deities do or don't exist in his or her campaign setting. For me, all the deities in our game they're all custom. Some of them I've just made up. Some of them I've reskinned from other settings.
Okay.
I kind of just picked and chosen and made my own like personal blend of deities.
So typically, like if you're gonna be like anybody can be religious, right? But
Right.
Most of the time, if you're religious, you're like a paladin or a cleric or like
Yeah.
that can like aid in like how religious you really are.
Anybody in the game can be religious, but paladins and clerics are defined by their religion. So yeah, if you choose a cleric or paladin, you need to choose a deity that you follow, and the deity you follow is gonna kind of define your behavior, because you follow that deity faithfully, and you want to present yourself in a way that deity would approve of.
So as far as creating your character, if you're trying to pick an alignment and you're going with a religious character, your deity might have an alignment, and you're probably going to have to follow it. Usually something very lawful, right?
Yeah, it just depends on the deity. They're completely chaotic deities. Yeah, when you choose your deity, your alignment is going to need to fall usually pretty close with theirs. You're generally not going to go against theirs, although I have some really cool concepts that I think they're cool, of a religious character whose alignment is actually completely polar opposite of the deity's following, because they have a very strange and strained relationship. But that's a conversation for another day.
Okay. So my explorer's pack, my dungeoneering kit, whatever you pick, is gonna have essential items that you're most likely going to need. When you're exploring your world or adventuring. I know my pack had like torches and a rope and like a mining pick and like all this stuff.
Yeah.
So those are just things that I get for playing D&D. Like here's a pack of things you need. Like take this with you, and I just kind of naturally have that on me.
Yep, exactly.
Am I gonna need to replenish those items like when I run out of torches?
Yeah. When you run out of torches, you will have to buy more.
Okay, so it's I think do I have it right when I say it's up to the DM how long your torches last and things like that, and like how many to use? Or
absolutely up to the DM on that one. Some DMs do not like to keep track of like variable sundries, if you will, at all.
It's kind of trivial.
I kind of fall into that. Like, I'm not paying attention to your guys' food rations unless you guys are really out there in the wild for days and days on end. Like, then I kind of have to, but like, you know, I'm just going to presume that you guys restock all that stuff when you get into the city. And honestly, food's pretty cheap, so I'm not really worried about like nitpicking your gold on that stuff. Some DMs, they play a totally different game. No, they're keeping track of all your resources, all your stuff.
Yeah, you got to figure out how to make money.
Exactly.
So you can do things.
Exactly. So you know, it depends on your DM. It depends on what kind of game you're playing.
So now we have Galthanis, a character born of this conversation. He's a wood elf fighter, eldritch knight archetype.
Yep.
What kind of pack is he getting?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think the explorer's pack, because I think he's left his life behind and he never intended on going back, and he's like, I need to survive in this world, and so he's gonna go down to the good old Elf Mart, buy himself an explorer's pack, and he ain't coming back.
He walks into Elf Mart, he buys his explorer's pack, and he says, I'm gonna adventure. I'm gonna see where
time to explore.
Yeah, where's life gonna take me if I just aimlessly start wandering the map? And
there we go.
So that's how he's born into the world, and where he gets picked up from there. Maybe he wanders into a town where the rest of your future party members have also possibly wandered into, or they live there, or whatever. And so they usually find a reason to come together and adventure as a team, because safety in numbers, right?
Yeah, safety in numbers. I mean, we could go back to your jump scenario. Like, that dude needed the strong guy to get across.
Right.
Like,
if he was alone, he would have. What would you do?
I don't know. Yeah. Who knows what would have happened? Like, it would have been a lot more difficult for him, though. Definitely.
You might have to go back. I mean, there are dead ends in D&D.
It's true.
So got a character. We've picked the race, class, background, alignments. We covered my items, what I've got with me typically. So am I ready? Am I ready to play D&D?
Yeah, Brian, I think it's time. I think you're ready.
Okay. Maybe I'll roll Galthanis, even though it's your character. I'm going to just take it.
Yeah, don't do that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll make my own. Yeah. Okay. Hey, everybody. We're going to go ahead and call it a game right there. I'm going to hand you off to our Sage DM. Let him give you some Sage DM advice for the week. Really help you out. Go ahead and take it away, Sage DM.
Hey, everybody. Sage DM here with your Sage DM advice for the week. Remember, if it has stats, you can kill it. That's all the wisdom juice I got in me for today. I'll check you all later. Bye!